Good morning once again, and welcome to Wansford Meadow, Wansford Pasture, Wansford whatever you want to call it. I've held back on this one because I wanted to make sure the season was pretty much going to be near its peak, and I think it will be. Usual stuff here, Southern Marsh, common spotted and everything in between. Not been here since 2 years ago, and that visit was probably one of the most spectacular visits anywhere really, across the country. I mean, everything was in pristine condition, absolute monster orchids, and capped off by not one but two Southern Marsh white forms, which is ironic as yesterday we were at the coast and saw 7 or 6, not quite sure which one it was. This is the only other site in the country where I've ever seen a white Southern Marsh orchid. So whether we'll see it today, I hope it's back, but just hoping to see some magnificent orchids. And yeah, let's crack on. Typical quality Southern Marsh orchid from Wansford. Not the biggest, but they're always genuine, decent stature, none of the stumpy stuff that you tend to find at other sites. Just top drawer. And of course you're going to find quite a lot of stuff today with the spotted leaves. That's a Grandis hybrid common spotted Southern Marsh, and we'll find quite a few of these. Been finding one or two like this season that, I mean, it's always nice to be bamboozled every now and then. And this one always bamboozles me because there's no markings on the leaves. Purely marsh orchid stem. I mean, everything's right from the bottom for a Southern Marsh orchid, but those markings, yeah, I mean, people will say, yeah, well, it's a variable plant, it's the Southern Marsh orchid, and it is. But, you know, common spotted orchid markings on there as clear as you could possibly get, really. So, you know, you've really got to call that a hybrid, common spotted Southern Marsh, but there's nothing else to indicate that it is apart from the patterns on the flowers. Southern Marsh orchid. Got those loop markings on the flowers with a little dot inside. Early marsh orchid. No spots on the leaves. Just shows how confusing dactylorhiza hybrids are. This is a Southern Marsh orchid. I don't think it's a hybrid at all, but it just goes to show it can have markings that can send you off down all sorts of avenues. I don't think those loop markings are convincing enough. I think it's just a Southern Marsh orchid. Could be wrong. Actually 95% of what we've seen so far are pure Southern Marsh, which is quite nice. Not been messed around with yet. This one's a hybrid, as you can see from the spotted leaves. Marsh orchid stem. Flowers with looped markings on, or indeed any markings that aren't just a plain row of dots going down the centre. That's a hybrid, a Grandis hybrid. I guess that's what a plain unmessed with Southern Marsh orchid should look like, really. It's got a slightly pale throat towards the top, and then a row of dots running down the centre, and not a lot else. That one, on the other hand, rather than just a row of dots down the centre, you've got lines going on, shades of common spotted type shaping to those lines. This is a hybrid, by the way. Spots on the leaves, so not a pure Southern Marsh. And just when you think, well, okay, I'm making sense of this, you then get something like this, which is a pure Southern Marsh according to the leaves. I don't know what you'd make of the markings. You know, you're tempted to say there's some early marsh going on there because there's two loops with dots in, but it's a Southern Marsh orchid according to the rest of the plant. And this could have been a back-crossed multi-generation hybrid which had some influence a long time ago from something, and that's typical of the orchids here, really. Don't try and make too much sense of them. That's about as far removed as you can get from a standard set of markings for a Southern Marsh orchid, but it's a Southern Marsh orchid. There's no spots on the leaves, no reason to believe that it's not a Southern Marsh orchid apart from the patterns on the flowers. So, yeah, designed to confuse. Now those are classic markings for Southern Marsh, all happening down the centre, really. And it is a Southern Marsh, 100% Southern Marsh. Again, lovely central markings, Southern Marsh orchid. There's a big one over there. It's actually a double, cheating. One on the back of the other. Both of the doubles piggybacking on one another are hybrids. Both have got spotted leaves. Some big ones down here, including the biggest one of the show so far, I think. It's a big one, but it's a plain Southern Marsh orchid. No doubting the leaves on this Grandis hybrid. Very intense colours in this one. I'm not sure to come over on the camera, but believe me, it burns your eyes, this one. Very intense. I think this pair is related. They've both got spotty leaves, they're both Grandis hybrids. I suppose you could argue you can see it in the flower. Too many lines to be just a Southern Marsh. People often say, how can I tell the difference? It's not black and white, put it that way. You can have an educated guess, but you cannot be certain, because they're both very variable plants in terms of their markings. So you mix them together and heaven only knows what comes out. But these are both hybrids. Well, I'm going to head off down into the, well, not the next field, but the walk through to the next field, which often throws up some interesting things. Yeah, this field, it is what it is. If you want Southern Marsh orchids, this is the one to come to because they haven't really been messed around too much. There are, I don't know, 10%, at most 10% maybe of what we see here are Grandis hybrids, Southern Marsh and common spotted, but 90% plus are pure Southern Marsh orchids. And it's interesting to look at them because, you know, you won't find two the same. There isn't a standard set of markings for a Southern Marsh orchid. There is a lot of variation in the flower, and it's worth bearing that in mind when you're looking at something you think might be a bit weird and indicative of a hybrid, and I've done that many times. Sometimes it's just one of the very many pattern variations of a Southern Marsh orchid. You never find anything in this field that is, I don't want to be unfair, spectacular. You don't find whites, you don't find anything particularly weird, you don't find other orchids, you just find Southern Marsh orchids, and it's a very, very excellent field if that's what you're looking for. So going to crack on and see what the next field has to show. I think I've mentioned this before. Whenever I walk along the edge of this field, I always think what a fantastic looking field in terms of orchid potential. You know, butterfly orchids, fragrant orchids, it just kind of looks right. And yet every time I've had a wander around it, there's nothing at all. I don't know whether pyramidals appear later in the season, but there's nothing, and yet it looks spot on. And I think it is part of the nature reserve, but certainly not for orchids. When you find orchids on this walk through to the second field, they're on the left here as you get closer to the water. So that's where I'll be looking. Good heavens, I'm good at this. I'm good at saying there's nothing here and then something appears. I mean, okay, it's right on the edge of the field, but it's in the field, so it proves me wrong once again. I should have said it also looks like a good field for bee orchids, but I didn't. Good to see one though, still opening up. A couple of buds up above, 3 buds up above. Looks like we're back on the Southern Marsh, but I actually wanted to find a common spotted, and there is one, I'm sure, sitting right in front of me. It comes to something when you get excited about common spotted, but why not? There you go. He deserves his 10 seconds of fame. A nice, pure, common spotted orchid. There you go, I knew they'd be down here. Common spotted orchids are plenty. Well, at least a nice group of them. Good to see. It's interesting, as soon as you bump into common spotted orchids, suddenly the mix of Southern Marsh swing towards the hybrid with the common spotted orchid, as this one does, showing off its markings nicely. Grandis hybrid. That's another nice set of hybrid markings. Here we go. Now we're upping the ante somewhat, getting into some serious quality. That is a magnificent hybrid. It's got spotty leaves, marsh orchid stem. It's a Grandis hybrid, but beautiful, beautifully marked. Spots all over, from bottom of the flower right up to the top. Very nice. I mean, it's a lovely orchid. It's a lovely set of markings. I'd have sworn, well, I don't know. I mean, the markings are down the middle, but there's a few too many lines on it for my liking. But it's a marsh orchid stem and a marsh orchid set of leaves. There's no spots on it. It's not a hybrid on the face of it. It is a Southern Marsh orchid, but very, very nicely marked Southern Marsh orchid it is. Fair bit of colour up ahead. Very nice. Some nice ones in the background actually I'm a little bit more interested in at the moment. What is that? Let's go and have a look. It's either a pale Southern Marsh or a very nice common spotted. Or something in between. Oh, I do like that. Absolutely. That's a banger, a clunker. Well, leaves first of all, no doubt about that. Spots everywhere. The stem, I don't even need to do this. Yeah, very flexible. That's a hollow stem. So we've got spotted leaves and a marsh orchid stem and just a wonderfully marked set of flowers. That could have been anything. Well, I don't think you could have called that ever a Southern Marsh orchid. You might have thought, is that a common spotted? But the shape of the flowers is wrong. And we know already from the stem there's a marsh orchid in there. So that's a rather wonderful Grandis hybrid. Clearly one of his relatives, a near identical set of markings on another Grandis hybrid. Nice little cluster of hybrids, they're all hybrids. Aha, another one. They're making a fool of me. Having said there's nothing in the field. Nothing except a few bee orchids. It would be nice if we found a Belgarum variety variation. Getting a bit greedy here with 2 bee orchids only. Good to see though. Just coming down to this walkthrough now, which is where last year or 2 years ago, last visit, things started to get a bit spectacular. So fingers crossed. That's a lovely little grouping down there. Very nice. Just had a quick look, about 99%. I saw one that wasn't a pure Southern Marsh, but 99% of them are pure Southern Marsh. Maybe that's because there's no common spotteds around here. Don't know if you can make out those leaves down there. Centre picture. There ain't no spots on them at all. Pure marsh orchid stem. But if you'd have seen those flowers without looking at the rest, you'd be screaming common spotted orchid. It's even got a quite pronounced pointy central lobe, but that cannot be a common spotted orchid. It is no wonder people get confused, including me. That has to be a hybrid. But maybe it's been crossed back many, many times with the common spotted. I really don't know. 0 spots, as I say. Very strange. I don't know how this comes over on the camera, but I can assure you there are Southern Marsh orchids of some stature absolutely everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. In all directions. Great numbers. Right, going to head down now and cross over into what I would consider the main field at this site. The one that is actually covered by the nature reserve. And it was truly spectacular 2 years ago, so fingers crossed it's going to deliver again. But these orchids were just off the planet last time I came here. grass looks rather long, but then I always say that. May not be a big one, but the markings on that, even from 20 foot away, look absolutely incredible. I mean, wow. That is crazy. Absolutely stunning. I think I'll be using that phrase a few more times in the next 10 minutes. It's actually a common spotted orchid. Flower shape's good, the stem's solid, spots on the leaves. What a magnificent common spotted orchid it is. It's another very nice one, and that is a hybrid spotted leaves marsh orchid stem. In every other sense you'd probably call it a common spotted, but common spotted, apart from about 0.1% of the population, do not have hollow stems, and this one does. Another one of these impossible, really impossible plants to identify with any confidence. It's a spotty leaved plant. It's got a solid stem. So everything's sort of common spotted, but it doesn't look like a common spotted flower. It's too rounded for my eyes. It's got some Southern Marsh in it to my eyes, but others might say no, it's just a common spotted. It doesn't look like one. Last time I came here 2 years ago, this patch here was absolutely rammed with the most delightful orchids, and there's about half a dozen or more, maybe 10. This year the grass is too long. I don't know whether they do graze it. I don't think they've grazed it this year. This is actually part of the nature reserve, so you'd think they might do something, but yeah, could be other reasons. Let's hope the other side delivers better. Still plenty of stout Southern Marsh orchids on show. It should be coming down to the hot spot now. This area is where it seriously took off last year. Another one, if you went on the flowers alone, you'd be completely bamboozled. Spotted leaves, hollow stem. Has to be a hybrid, therefore, which is probably about right. Couple of real clonkers there, possibly first generation Grandis hybrids. The theory is if it's the first generation, i.e. the first time they've grown, they will be bigger than either of the parents, which is definitely the case with these two. So highly possible, but not definitely, a pair of first generation Grandis hybrids. That's a very pretty, I was about to say pale form of the Southern Marsh orchid, but it's got spotty leaves. Excuse me, yeah, it's got spotty leaves, so in theory it's a pale Grandis hybrid. You don't get many of those. Another one to do your head in. Spotty leaves, rock solid stem, completely and utterly common spotted orchid. Even the markings are common spotted orchid, but the flower shape doesn't look too right. And that central lobe isn't really common spotted in style. It's more Southern Marsh, so I don't know. In every respect it's common spotted, except don't like the look of the flower. Always good numbers down here. It's actually quite nice to see a pure 100% definite common spotted orchid, which is what this is. No trickery at all. It is common spotted orchid. You see that prominent 3 lobes on the flower, with the centre one dropping way down, pointy, sticking out a lot. Classic textbook Common spotted orchid, no round flower here where the central lobe just protrudes slightly, which is more Southern Marsh, but this is what a common spotted should look like in every sense. If you compare this to the last one, you see there is a prominent lobe at the bottom in the centre, but it's a rounded sort of flower. It's not as angular as that previous one. It's still not, I mean, you know, you wouldn't put your mortgage on this one, but it's a hollow stem. It's got no spots on the leaves. Doesn't look like a Southern Marsh orchid flower, but then again, spots and whatever down the middle. Take that prominent central lobe out and it's a classic Southern Marsh orchid, apart from slightly pale in palette, but that's about it. But it certainly isn't a common spotted orchid. Grandis hybrid, packed in tight. My eyes are drawn to a patch of very light coloured orchids up ahead, so I presume they're going to be common spotted. There's a nice group of them. Let's go and have a look. That's if I don't fall over one of these many mounds on the field. Stop laughing. Let's have a look at what these are. Common spotted orchids. Just a whole patch of very lightly coloured common spotted orchids. Common spotted orchid with very bizarre markings on it. If the wind had stopped still, you might be able to see it. There you go, very strange markings. Common spotted though. I never have any joy finding pure white common spotters. They've always got a blush colour of some sort that means they're not really pure white. This is pure white, absolutely pure white common spotted orchid. Very nice to see. Another of these classic boldly marked Grandis hybrids. Nice family portrait. Dad on the left, mum on the right, one of the kids in the middle. All of them Grandis hybrids. Nice boldly marked common spotted orchid. That's pretty. Common spotted orchid with a nice sort of pinkish blush down the bottom. I know it's not open yet, but it still looks very elegant. Take a look at that bottom flower and see how the three lobes are so significantly divided, and that bottom middle lobe protrudes quite a long way from the other two. And look at what's next door. Bear with me a second while I get this in focus. On the face of it, this is also a common spotted orchid. It's got spotted leaves, and the markings are not dissimilar, but if you look at the flower shape, it's more rounded, and that central lobe doesn't really protrude. It just sort of nips out a little bit, but you can't see clear divisions between the three lobes on the flower, which is why, even though everything says it's common spotted in terms of leaves, in terms of stem, in terms of patterns on the flower, I just can't accept that that's not got at least a small bit of Southern Marsh orchid influence in it to create the flower shape that it's got. I could be wrong, could be wrong. That's my thinking. Nice, nicely marked Grandis hybrid. Common spotted, wonderful markings, classic womble faces, just what you want. Wonderful patch this, I remember this from 2 years ago. Probably were a bit bigger then, but this is still mighty impressive. Common spotted, Southern Marsh, Grandis hybrids, all having a ball in the sunshine. Another fantastic family group of Grandis hybrids. Very nice. I'm going to stick my neck out now. There's a white over there. Don't know if you can pick it up in the centre of the screen now. It's absolutely screaming out. It's actually not in the centre of the screen. It is in the centre of the screen now. It's just glowing. If that isn't a pure white common spotted, I'll be gobsmacked. Let's go and have a look. Prove myself wrong, no doubt. Of course, it could be something better than a pure white common spotted orchid. There you go, you knew what this was. I actually didn't. I hadn't even started looking for this yet. I thought this was going to be a white common spotted, but it's the white Southern Marsh orchid that I found a few years back. I think I was the first one to find it, and it's fantastic to see it back again. I'm not saying it wasn't here last year, but it's just great to see it again, looking fit and healthy as well. You can see I'm a wedding photographer. I'm always drawn to these family groups. Common spotted orchid family. May not be quite on the level of 2022, but then it was never going to be. But boy oh boy, there's some fantastic collections here. Great stuff. Grandis hybrid, nicely marked, stem like a tree trunk, a real monster. Another lovely collection of common spotted orchids. Wow. Orchid heaven. As far as the eye can see. Grandis hybrid. This is an absolute clunker in size at the very least. Stem like a tree trunk. It's a Grandis hybrid. Beautifully marked. A monster in every sense, that one. Another nicely marked hybrid. Southern Marsh orchid on the right, common spotted orchid on the left, both nicely marked. Their offspring should be good. I've come right down the bottom end of the field now, which I've not been to before, and it just doesn't stop. It just does not stop. The number of orchids here is going easily into the thousands, and wherever you go, wherever you look, you see even more up on the horizons. Magnificent. A couple of nicely marked hybrids. Wonderfully marked leaves. Big stem and wonderfully marked flowers. Lovely Grandis hybrid. If only there were heath spotted orchids here, I could have fun with this. Post it and let people online tell me what it is. I'm sure heath spotted would feature somewhere, but there's nothing unusual down below. No spots on leaves, hollow stem. It's a Southern Marsh orchid as things stand. It just goes to show how variable they can be, which is a good note to end this tour really. Give them pride of place, because there's hardly an orchid in this field that doesn't owe something to the good old Southern Marsh orchid. Right, call it a day. I mean, 2022, I'll put a link to it at the end of this video, you can watch it yourself. There'll never be, I don't think, a site visit here or anywhere that is, certainly in the Peterborough area, that would be as spectacular as that. And I knew that, that's why I didn't come here last year. And I kind of knew today it's never going to be as good, but wow, it is still brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And in terms of, you know, Southern Marsh, Common Marsh, dactylarizers, hybrids, there isn't a better site in and around Peterborough, and probably around means quite a distance away from here. If you know better, I want to see it, let me know. It is a fantastic collection of orchids, and stout, bold orchids too. There's no stumpy nonsense here. It's all quality stuff, so fantastic to see that white. I couldn't find the other one, but the other one was struggling anyway 2 years ago. But yeah, brilliant to see that very healthy looking white Southern Marsh orchid, and yeah, completely happy with the trip. So thank you once again for joining me. I'm going to take some time off now. I've got 2 or 3 days off, and then I'm back on it, I think Tuesday next week for another busy spell. So thanks for joining me, as I say, and I will see you again soon.